Where is the 12th stone? The question cut through the ballroom so cleanly that even the crystal glasses seemed to stop ringing. Emily Carter froze with a silver tray balanced against her hip, 6 champagne flutes trembling under the chandeliers. Her bracelet had slipped down her bruised wrist. The purple fingerprints she had worked so hard to hide flashed beneath the light for half a second. Nobody noticed the bruises. Nobody except him. But he wasn't looking at the bruises. He was looking at the empty setting where a blue sapphire should have been. 3 hours earlier, Emily had stood alone in the employee locker room beneath the east wing of Blackthorn House. The sounds of preparation drifted through the ceiling above her like distant thunder. Caterers, florists, security teams, wealthy donors arriving in black cars that cost more than she earned in 10 years. She sat on a folding chair and carefully fastened the old silver bracelet around her wrist. The metal was worn smooth from years of use. 11 sapphires caught the fluorescent light. The 12th space sat empty. Her fingers lingered there longer than they should have. She thought of her mother sitting in a memory care facility 40 miles away. Some days her mother forgot where she lived. Some days she forgot what year it was. Once she forgot her own birthday. But she never forgot the bracelet. Every visit began the same way. Her mother would stare at Emily's wrist and ask, "Where's the missing stone, sweetheart?" Emily always smiled and changed the subject, because the truth felt too dangerous to say out loud. "You look pale." The voice came from the doorway. Eleanor Graves stood there holding a clipboard against her navy suit. Elegant, composed, the woman who controlled every employee inside Blackthorn House. "I'm fine, Emilian Suerde." Eleanor's smile appeared instantly, warm enough to fool strangers, cold enough to make employees nervous. "Of course you are. You're always fine." She stepped closer. "Just remember, tonight isn't about us. Some people mistake visibility for importance." Her eyes drifted briefly toward the bracelet before returning to Emily's face. "Try not to attract attention." Then she walked away. The words sounded harmless, helpful even, but Emily knew better. Eleanor never raised her voice, never threatened. She simply reminded people where they belonged. And Emily belonged somewhere invisible. By 7 o'clock, the mansion glowed like something from another world. Marble floors reflected candlelight. String musicians played beside floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlantic. Guests in tailored tuxedos and designer gowns moved through the rooms carrying glasses of rare wine. Emily moved among them the way she always did. Quietly, efficiently, forgettably. Except tonight she couldn't stop watching. 3 days earlier she had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. A phone, an old phone, passed from one pair of hands to another in a dark hallway near the estate offices. Eleanor had noticed her standing there. Emily remembered that look. Not anger, not panic, recognition, like someone silently calculating a problem. Since then, the bruises had appeared. The missing sapphire had disappeared. And every instinct she possessed screamed that the two things were connected. At 9:42, a donor backed into her near the auction stage. The tray shifted. A champagne glass tipped and shattered across the marble. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Emily immediately crouched to gather the pieces. Her bracelet slid down her wrist. Silence followed. Heavy. Watching. Then a pair of polished black shoes stopped beside her. Slowly she looked up. Dominic Moretti stood there, broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit. His expression unreadable. The most powerful man in the room. The man she had worked for nearly 3 years without exchanging more than a handful of sentences. His eyes lowered to her wrist. Not the bruises. Not the broken glass. The bracelet. His gaze sharpened almost imperceptibly. "Where is the 12th stone?" he asked. Emily felt her heartbeat stumble. Because for the first time all evening she realized something impossible. The missing sapphire wasn't the only thing Dominic Moretti recognized. He was staring at the bracelet as if he had seen it before. Dominic Moretti's gaze lingered on the bracelet for 1 second longer than it should have. Then he stepped aside and allowed Emily to gather the broken glass. Nothing dramatic. No raised voice. No demand for answers. Somehow that was worse. The room slowly exhaled and conversation resumed, but she could feel it now, the shift, like a crack forming beneath ice. 10 minutes later, she was in the service corridor behind the ballroom, pushing a cart loaded with empty trays. The sounds of the gala faded behind heavy doors. Here there was only the hum of industrial refrigerators, the hiss of the dish machine, and the sharp smell of detergent. Emily set the tray down and pressed both palms against the stainless steel counter until the trembling stopped. She had almost made it through the night. Almost. You dropped a glass. Eleanor's voice arrived before the woman did. Emily looked up. Eleanor stood at the end of the corridor holding a tablet. Perfect posture, perfect hair, perfect smile. Accidents happen, Emily said quietly. Of course they do. Eleanor approached and placed a printed form on the counter. Which is why I already completed the incident report for you. Emily stared at it. Time of incident, location, witnesses, cause of injury, everything filled in. The form claimed the bruises came from a slip in the laundry room 48 hours earlier. I didn't write that.
No.
Eleanor's smile never moved. I did. To save you trouble. Emily's eyes dropped lower. The report had been generated at 3:17 p.m. The bruises hadn't existed at 3:17 p.m. Her stomach tightened. I can't sign something that isn't true. For the first time, something cold flickered behind Eleanor's eyes. Not anger. Calculation. Truth is a flexible thing, Emily, especially for employees. Then she turned and walked away. Emily folded the paper and slipped it into her apron pocket instead of throwing it away. 20 minutes later, she found herself back near the administrative offices delivering bottled water. The hallway was nearly empty. Most of the staff were serving guests upstairs. As she passed the security station, something caught her attention. A monitor displayed camera feeds from around the estate. One screen was black, then another, not malfunctioning, disabled. Emily slowed. The timestamp on the corner flashed 8:42 p.m. Her breath caught. That was the exact hour she had been pulled into the storage wing 3 nights earlier. Problem. The security supervisor looked up from his desk. Emily forced a smile. No, sir. She kept walking, but she memorized the number above the dead feed.
Camera E14.
The corridor outside the records room. The same corridor where she had seen Eleanor hand off the old phone. Later, while clearing tables near the private donor lounge, she found a crumpled receipt beneath a chair. Most people would have ignored it. Emily didn't. Years of caring for a mother who forgot everything had taught her to notice details before they vanished. The receipt was from a coffee shop 6 miles away. 2 drinks purchased at 11:18 p.m. 3 nights ago. 1 black coffee. 1 vanilla latte. Eleanor hated coffee. Everyone who worked in the house knew that. She only drank tea. Emily slipped the receipt into her apron beside the false incident report. When she looked up, Dominic Moretti was standing across the room speaking with a senator. Yet somehow his eyes found hers for half a second. Not warm, not suspicious, measuring, as if fitting pieces together. Then he looked away. Near midnight, while changing table linens in the east corridor, Emily noticed something else. The shift log hanging outside the security office had been updated. Her name appeared twice, once for the shift she had worked, and once for a second shift that never existed. Someone had added her employee number to a location she had never entered. Beside the entry was a keycard authorization code, and the signature approving it belonged to Eleanor Graves. Emily stood frozen in the empty corridor, staring at Eleanor Graves' signature beside a shift she had never worked. The paper rustled softly beneath the air vent overhead. Somewhere downstairs, a dishwasher roared to life. Somewhere above, wealthy donors laughed over $1,000 auction items. But here, under the fluorescent lights of the administrative wing, the silence felt different. Intentional, like something holding its breath. She carefully photographed the shift log with her phone. Then another photo of the authorization code. Then a third. Years of caring for her mother had taught her a simple lesson. Memory failed. Proof survived. By the time she returned the clipboard to the wall, her pulse had settled into something colder. Less fear. More certainty. Something was wrong. Not emotionally wrong. Not intuitively wrong. Documented wrong. 15 minutes later, the gala finally began thinning out. Guests drifted toward waiting cars while staff started clearing linens and collecting centerpieces. Emily pushed a cart stacked with folded tablecloths toward the East Service elevator. Halfway there she heard voices. She stopped instinctively. The corridor ahead turned sharply toward the executive offices. Most employees never went there. Eleanor's voice floated around the corner. Calm. Controlled. No, that's already been handled. A man's voice answered, low and difficult to hear. Emily recognized it immediately.
Victor Lang.
Family attorney. The same man she'd seen receiving the old phone 3 nights ago. What about the girl? He asked. Pause followed. Then Eleanor laughed softly. Not amusement. Relief. She's a maid, Victor. Not an investigator. Emily's grip tightened around the cart handle. People see what they're trained to see. Another pause. And she's trained to clean. Footsteps followed. Emily immediately turned the cart and disappeared through a service door before either of them rounded the corner. Her heart pounded all the way back to the laundry station. But one sentence refused to leave her head. What about the girl? Not what happened. Not what she saw. The girl. As if she had become a problem requiring discussion. Near 1 in the morning she finally clocked out. Most of the estate slept by then. Hallways that had glowed with luxury hours earlier now felt hollow and oversized. She crossed the employee parking lot under pale security lights and unlocked her aging Honda Civic. Before starting the engine, she pulled the folded incident report from her apron, then the coffee receipt, then her phone. One by one she laid everything across the passenger seat. The timeline still bothered her. The receipt showed 11:18 p.m. 3 nights ago. The old phone exchange had happened shortly before midnight. She knew because she had checked the wall clock while delivering towels. She remembered the exact time. 11:47. Her mother had called from the care facility at 11:32 that night. The voicemail still sat on her phone. Emily opened it and listened again. Her mother's confused voice filled the car. Sweetheart. You left your bracelet. Emily closed her eyes. Wait. Her eyes opened again. Slowly. The voicemail timestamp read 11:32 p.m. She remembered where she had been standing when the call came in. Outside the record's hallway.
Camera e 14.
The same camera that had mysteriously gone dark. The same camera security logs claimed stopped recording at 11:40. Except that couldn't be true. Because she distinctly remembered looking up at the monitor mounted near the hallway after her mother's call. The red recording light had still been on. Emily sat very still. Then she opened the photo she'd taken of the disabled camera report earlier that night. Her stomach dropped. The shutdown time wasn't 11:40 p.m. Someone had altered it afterward. Zooming in revealed a faint digital artifact beside the number. The original timestamp underneath was still barely visible. 12:04 a.m., which meant the camera hadn't gone dark before the phone exchange. It had gone dark 17 minutes after it. The realization followed Emily into the next morning like a shadow she couldn't shake. 17 minutes. Not before. After. Someone had changed the record because the real timeline mattered. By noon, Blackthorn House had transformed again. The gala decorations were gone. Fresh flowers stood in crystal vases. Polished floors reflected sunlight pouring through 30-foot windows. Wealth had a way of erasing evidence overnight. Emily spent the morning replacing linens in the private dining wing, moving quietly through rooms designed for people who never carried their own plates. At 11:30, a message arrived on her employee app. Mandatory meeting. Executive dining room. Attendance required. Her stomach tightened. The executive dining room occupied the western corner of the estate. Mahogany. Walls. Imported Italian marble. Paintings worth more than entire neighborhoods. Emily stepped inside and immediately understood she wasn't supposed to feel comfortable there. Eleanor Graves sat at one end of the long table. Victor Lang occupied a chair beside her. Two board members from the Family Foundation reviewed documents near the windows. Nobody offered Emily a seat. Nobody told her why she was there. Eleanor smiled warmly. Emily, thank you for coming. The chair across from them remained conspicuously empty, like a witness stand. Emily stayed standing. You wanted to see me? Just a small administrative matter. Eleanor slid a folder across the table. We're cleaning up paperwork related to your accident. The word accident landed gently. Deliberately, Victor opened a pen and placed it on top of the folder. This confirms that your injuries occurred from a workplace fall, and that no further investigation is necessary. His tone was professional, reasonable, the kind of voice people trusted. Emily didn't touch the pen. Because that isn't what happened. Silence settled over the room. One board member lowered her glasses. The other looked vaguely annoyed. Eleanor's smile remained flawless. Emily, memory becomes unreliable under stress. Not mine. Victor folded his hands. You understand that false accusations can damage reputations. I didn't accuse anyone. Exactly, Eleanor said smoothly. And we'd like to keep it that way. The words sounded kind, helpful, protective. Somehow they felt colder than a threat. Emily looked down at the folder, then reached into her pocket and placed the incident report on the table. The original one. The version generated before the bruises existed. This was created before the injury happened. Nobody spoke. Victor's eyes flicked toward Eleanor for half a second. Just half a second. But Emily saw it. The way people glance toward authority before answering. Eleanor recovered first. Administrative error. At exactly 3:17 p.m.? Emily asked quietly. Hours before the incident? Another silence. Longer this time. The board members exchanged looks. Not suspicion. Discomfort. Wealthy people disliked complications. From somewhere behind her came the sound of a door opening. Emily didn't turn. Neither did Eleanor. But Victor did. Instantly, Emily noticed. Then Eleanor noticed him noticing. Tiny movements. Tiny cracks. We're trying to help you, Eleanor said. Her voice softened. You have medical bills. A mother in long-term care. This house has always been generous to its employees. There it was. Not a threat. A reminder. Of class. Of dependence. Of who could afford lawyers and who couldn't. Emily straightened her name tag with one hand. A small gesture. Barely visible. My mother taught me something before she got sick. Eleanor's smile thinned. And what's that? Emily met her eyes. If someone asks you to sign a lie, it's because the truth scares them. Nobody moved. The room seemed to contract around the words. Then a familiar voice spoke from the doorway behind her. Low, calm, dangerous precisely because it wasn't loud. Interesting. Dominic Moretti stepped into the room. His gaze moved from the unsigned document to the pen waiting beside it. Then to Emily. Then finally to Eleanor. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. Dominic pulled out a chair and sat at the far end of the table. Continue. That single word changed everything. Eleanor smiled immediately, confident again, composed again, as if she had regained control. Of course. She reached for the folder and closed it. But in her haste, one sheet slipped loose and slid partly onto the polished table. Just far enough for Emily to see the authorization code printed near the bottom. The same code that appeared beside the fake shift entry in the security log. The authorization code sat in Emily's mind long after the meeting ended. Numbers had never meant much to most people. To her, they were anchors, medication schedules, billing dates, appointment times, the small details that kept fragile lives from falling apart. She spent the afternoon changing linens in the guest wing, but her thoughts kept circling back to that code. The one on the fake shift entry. The one on the document Eleanor tried to hide. The same sequence of letters and numbers appearing where it shouldn't. By 5 o'clock, the estate had settled into its usual rhythm. Staff moved quietly through polished hallways. The scent of lemon cleaner mixed with expensive cologne. Somewhere a piano played softly from the west drawing room. Wealth wrapped everything in comfort, even suspicion. Emily was carrying fresh towels toward the employee locker area when she heard someone call her name. Emily. She turned. Maria Gutierrez stood beside the housekeeping supply room clutching a small plastic evidence bag. Maria had worked at Blackthorn House nearly 20 years. She noticed things because nobody noticed her. I found something. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Emily stepped closer. Inside the bag sat a blue sapphire, the missing stone. For a second the world seemed to narrow around it. 11 years of wear had left tiny scratches along one edge. She recognized them immediately. Where? Emily asked. Under a filing cabinet. Maria hesitated. In Eleanor's office. Emily didn't move, didn't speak. The stone looked impossibly small. Yet suddenly it felt heavier than anything she'd carried all week. Nobody saw me pick it up, Maria said quietly. I thought you should have it. Emily accepted the bag with both hands. Careful, almost reverent. Thank you. 20 minutes later, she stood outside Dominic Moretti's private study. 2 security men opened the door without a word. The room beyond smelled faintly of cedar and old leather. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls. Sunset painted long bars of gold across the hardwood floor. Dominic sat behind a massive desk reviewing documents. He looked up once. Nothing more. Emily placed the evidence bag on the desk between them. I found the stone. Silence followed. Dominic lowered his pen. His gaze settled on the sapphire. Then on her. Then back to the sapphire. He said nothing for so long that Emily began hearing the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Finally, he picked up the bag. Turned it over once. Twice. His expression didn't change. But something in his eyes did. A calculation. Where? He asked. Eleanor's office. Another silence. Longer this time. Interesting. Before Emily could respond, a knock interrupted them. Victor Lang entered carrying a folder. He stopped immediately when he saw the stone. A flicker crossed his face. Gone almost instantly. Dominic noticed. Emily noticed him noticing. Victor recovered first. Coincidences happen. His voice remained calm, professional. The cleaning staff moves through every office in the building. Dominic continued studying the sapphire. Coincidences do happen. Victor relaxed slightly. Then Dominic held the stone toward the window. The sunlight caught its underside. His eyes narrowed. But blood doesn't. The room became very still. Emily's breath caught. There, hidden along the metal setting attached to the sapphire, sat a dark reddish stain no larger than a grain of rice. Victor stepped forward immediately. Old residue. Probably from the injury.
No.
Emily answered before she could stop herself. Both men looked at her. She swallowed. I never bled on the bracelet. Another silence. Dominic turned the stone over again. Thoughtful. Dangerous. Like a man rearranging pieces on a board nobody else could see. Then he opened a desk drawer and removed a photograph. Emily only saw it for a second. A smiling middle-aged man standing beside accounting records. Dominic placed the picture beside the sapphire. The stain. The photo. The missing stone. None of it made sense yet. But something connected them. Victor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Dominic noticed that too. He slid the photograph back into the drawer without explanation. Then looked out the window toward the ocean. Send this to the lab. His voice remained quiet, almost casual. Yet when he finally turned back toward Emily, the question in his eyes was no longer directed at her. For the first time, it seemed aimed at someone he had trusted for a very long time. Rain tapped softly against the tall windows of Dominic Moretti's study long after sunset. The sound blended with the ticking grandfather clock and the faint hum of the climate system hidden inside the walls. The sapphire sat alone in a glass evidence tray on his desk. Small, ordinary, worthless compared to the art hanging around it. Yet nobody had touched it for 3 hours. Dominic sat in silence, reading a report that had just arrived from the lab. Across from him, his private attorney waited without speaking. Years working for Dominic had taught him that silence usually meant the dangerous part was happening inside the man's head. Finally, Dominic set the report down. The blood. The attorney cleared his throat. Male. Not Emily Carter's. Dominic nodded once. Age. Estimated between 50 and 60. The room fell quiet again. Dominic opened a drawer and removed the photograph Emily had seen earlier. The smiling accountant. Richard Voss. 57 years old. Officially dead for 8 months. Cause of death. Suicide. The attorney watched Dominic's eyes settle on the photograph. You think there's a connection? Dominic didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up the sapphire and turned it slowly beneath the desk lamp. I don't like coincidences. 2 hours later, he stood in the records archive beneath the estate. Rows of filing cabinets stretched beneath fluorescent lights. A place built to preserve memory. Dominic rarely came here himself. Tonight he did. A records clerk nearly dropped her clipboard when she saw him. Sir. Richard Voss. The woman blinked. His personnel file? Everything. 20 minutes later, Dominic sat alone at a steel table reviewing documents. Employment history, tax records, internal audits, exit interviews. Most looked normal, until one page didn't. A reimbursement request filed 6 days before Richard died. Attached was a receipt from a coffee shop 6 miles from Blackthorn House. Dominic stared at it. 1 black coffee, 1 vanilla latte, same date, same time, same receipt Emily had found beneath the donor lounge chair. His eyes narrowed. Slowly, deliberately, Richard Voss hated coffee. Everyone who worked with him knew it. He drank tea. Every morning. Every meeting. Every year. Dominic flipped to another document. Visitor records. One name appeared repeatedly during Richard's final month at the estate.
Eleanor Graves.
Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the ocean. Meanwhile, across town, Emily sat beside her mother's bed in the memory care facility. The television murmured quietly from a corner shelf. Her mother slept beneath a thin blanket, one frail hand resting on the pillow. A stack of hospital bills sat inside Emily's purse, unpaid, increasing every month. She could have asked for help. Many people would have. Dominic Moretti had more money than she could imagine. But money wasn't why she kept coming back. She looked at her mother's sleeping face and whispered, I just want them to stop lying. Her mother didn't wake. But the words felt important anyway. Back at Blackthorn House, Dominic requested another file. Security access logs from the month before Richard Voss died. The archive manager delivered them personally. Dominic reviewed every entry himself. Midnight approached. Rain continued striking the windows. Then he found it. One access card had entered the records wing at 12:04 a.m. on the night Richard disappeared. The exact time camera E14 stopped recording. The exact time someone altered the system. The card belonged to Eleanor Graves. Dominic leaned back slowly. Not shocked. Not angry. Worse. Colder. He reached for a second folder. This one containing employee complaints filed over the past 5 years. Most had been dismissed. Several involved staff transfers. 2 involved missing documentation. 1 involved a housekeeper who claimed evidence had disappeared after she reported financial irregularities. The complaint had been closed by Eleanor. Dominic stared at the page for a long moment. Then another pattern emerged. Small, quiet, easy to miss unless someone forced themselves to look. The way Emily had. The way he hadn't. His phone vibrated against the desk. A message from his security chief. The old phone recovered from Victor Lang's office had finally been unlocked. Dominic opened the report. The device contained only one saved contact.
Eleanor Graves.
He set the phone down and looked out into the darkness beyond the rain-streaked glass. For the first time in years, he found himself wondering whether he had spent far too long trusting the wrong person, and not nearly long enough listening to the right one. The old phone sat face down in the center of the conference table like a loaded weapon nobody wanted to touch. Morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackthorn House, turning the polished wood into sheets of gold. Dominic Moretti stood at the far end of the room, one hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. Calm, motionless, the kind of stillness that made other people nervous. Eleanor Graves arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late. As always, she wore a cream-colored suit and carried a leather portfolio beneath one arm. Her smile appeared the moment she entered. "You wanted to see me?" Dominic nodded toward a seat. "Seat." Nothing about his tone sounded unusual. That was what made it dangerous. Emily stood near the sideboard arranging coffee cups. Not serving. Watching. Nobody seemed to notice her. People rarely did. The room slowly filled with department heads, legal staff, and 2 members of the family foundation. A routine administrative review. At least that was what everyone believed. Dominic waited until the final chair was occupied. Then he slid a single document across the table. "Humor me." Eleanor glanced down. Security access logs. "What am I looking at?" "A memory test." A few people exchanged confused looks. Dominic continued. "You told investigators you never entered the records wing the night Richard Voss disappeared." Eleanor's expression remained composed. "Because I didn't." Dominic nodded once. "That's what I remembered too." Silence followed. Not hostile. Just long enough to become uncomfortable. Emily watched Eleanor's right hand settle on her portfolio, then tighten slightly. Dominic noticed it too. "The problem," he said quietly, "is that memory can be unreliable." The words landed gently. Eleanor herself had used that exact phrase against Emily. For the first time, her smile weakened. Dominic picked up the old phone. "Do you recognize this?"
No.
Immediate. Smooth. Practiced. Dominic turned the phone over and placed it back down. "Interesting." He looked toward Emily. "What was the first thing you noticed when you saw Victor Lang receive this device?" Every head turned toward her. The attention felt heavy. Expensive rooms always had a way of making working people feel smaller. Emily swallowed once, then answered. "Not the phone." Dominic waited. "His coffee." Confusion flickered across several faces. Emily continued. "Mr. Lang was carrying a black coffee. The receipt showed a black coffee and a vanilla latte." Eleanor relaxed slightly. Tiny exhale. "That's hardly evidence." "No," Dominic agreed. "It isn't." Another silence. Then he opened a folder and removed a surveillance photograph. Grainy. Black and white. A hallway image captured from a distant camera. Victor Lang holding a coffee cup. Eleanor standing beside him. The timestamp visible in the corner. 11:48 p.m. The exact window everyone had been discussing. Dominic slid the photo across the table. "What interests me is that the latte never appears." Nobody spoke. Eleanor's eyes remained on the photograph. Perhaps someone discarded it. Perhaps. Dominic's voice never changed. Emily noticed something then. Small. Easy to miss. Eleanor had always worn jasmine perfume. Every employee knew it. The scent lingered in hallways after she left. 3 nights ago, when Emily saw the phone exchange, she remembered smelling something different. Cedar. Men's cologne. The same scent now drifting from the leather portfolio beneath Eleanor's hand. Emily looked closer. A luggage tag protruded slightly from an inside pocket. Not enough for most people to care. Enough for her. She could read the first 3 letters. Phone. Victor Lang and Associates. Her pulse quickened. Dominic was asking another question. Simple. Harmless. "Eleanor." She looked up. "Yes." "Why are you carrying Victor's portfolio?" The room went completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody reached for their coffee. Eleanor's hand froze on the leather case. For the first time since Emily had known her, she didn't answer immediately. And in that tiny hesitation, she seemed to understand something the rest of the room had not yet realized. Emily Carter was no longer standing there alone. No one answered Eleanor's silence. The conference room remained perfectly still. Sunlight stretched across the polished table, coffee cooling untouched in porcelain cups. For a moment it seemed possible that the question would simply hang there forever. Then Eleanor smiled. Not naturally. Deliberately. Victor left it in my office after a meeting. Her fingers slowly released the portfolio. I'm sure there's a perfectly reasonable explanation. Dominic watched her without blinking. Across the table, Victor Lang looked down. That was the first crack. Not panic. Not guilt. Avoidance. Emily saw it immediately. So did Dominic. Open it, Dominic said. Eleanor's smile tightened. Excuse me? The portfolio. His voice remained calm. Open it. Nobody moved. The room suddenly felt smaller despite its size. Eleanor obeyed. Inside were contracts, correspondence, financial summaries. Ordinary documents. Safe documents. The kind people expected to find. Victor visibly relaxed. Then Emily noticed something protruding beneath the interior lining. A corner of plastic. Barely visible. Wait! Every head turned toward her. Speaking in rooms like this always felt wrong, like walking into a church through the wrong door. But she stepped forward anyway. There's something underneath. Eleanor immediately closed the portfolio. Too fast. Dominic saw that too. Open it again. This time, one of the security men moved beside the table. The hidden compartment was discovered within seconds. Inside sat a small flash drive wrapped in tissue paper. Nobody spoke as Dominic connected it to a laptop. The loading icon rotated across the screen. Once, twice, 3 times. The entire room seemed to breathe around that circle. Then files appeared. Hundreds of them. Financial transfers. Personnel records. Archived correspondence. Deleted reports. The silence deepened. Dominic opened the first folder. A series of payments routed through shell companies. The second folder contained employee complaints that had supposedly never existed. The third contained security records, altered timestamps, deleted entries, rewritten access logs. Emily recognized one immediately. Her own. The fake shift assignment. Her employee number. Her authorization code. Her name. Proof. Not suspicion. Not memory. Proof. Victor slowly removed his glasses. Eleanor stared at the screen without speaking. Dominic clicked another folder. An audio file appeared, dated 8 months earlier. Richard Voss, the accountant. Dominic pressed play. Static filled the room. Then a man's nervous voice emerged. If anything happens to me, Eleanor Graves has the records. Victor knows where the backups are. Nobody moved. The recording continued. Richard described hidden accounts, falsified audits, missing funds. Then came another sentence. One that drained the color from Dominic's face. Mr. Moretti doesn't know. He trusts her completely. The audio ended. Silence followed. Not ordinary silence. The kind that arrives after something breaks. Dominic sat perfectly still. Emily had never seen him look stunned before. Not angry. Not emotional. Just still. His eyes lowered to the table. To the employee complaints. To the rewritten reports. To her forged shift logs. Years of documents bearing his name. His company. His authority. Injustice carried out beneath a roof he owned by people he trusted. Slowly, he reached for a file buried near the bottom. Personnel report. Emily recognized it immediately. Her own. Medical hardship notation. Mother's Alzheimer's diagnosis. Outstanding hospital debt. A note in Eleanor's handwriting recommending increased compliance leverage. Dominic stared at those 3 words for a very long time. When he finally looked up, something had changed. Not louder, colder, more final. Eleanor opened her mouth as if to explain, to negotiate, to redirect. Dominic raised one hand. She stopped speaking. The gesture was almost gentle. Somehow it felt worse than shouting. He removed the flash drive from the laptop, placed it carefully beside the sapphire on the table, and looked toward the family attorney seated near the door. Call my attorney. The flash drive and the sapphire remained on the conference table long after everyone else had stopped looking at them. Strange how the smallest objects sometimes carried the heaviest truths. Within 48 hours, The consequences began moving through Blackthorn House like a tide that could no longer be held back. Eleanor Graves was removed from every position she held. Her access cards were deactivated. Her authority over staff records, charitable funds, payroll systems, and personnel decisions disappeared before sunset. Victor Lang resigned before formal proceedings could begin, though his resignation did little to stop the investigations that followed. The Family Foundation opened a full audit. Attorneys arrived. Accountants arrived. Forensic specialists arrived. Documents that had spent years hidden inside drawers were suddenly examined under bright lights. For the first time, the system that had protected powerful people was being forced to explain itself. Emily watched most of it from a distance. That part surprised many people. They expected demands, anger, revenge. Instead, she spent her evenings where she always had, sitting beside her mother's bed, holding her hand, reading aloud from worn paperback novels. One rainy Thursday afternoon, Dominic Moretti arrived at the memory care facility without an entourage. No security detail. No assistance. Just a dark coat and a folder beneath one arm. Emily found him standing beside the nurse's station speaking quietly with the facility director. When she approached, he handed her the folder. "What is this?" she asked. "Corrections." Inside were documents. Official documents. Employee records amended and restored. Missing complaints returned to personnel files. Wrongfully terminated workers offered compensation. Back wages approved. Benefits reinstated. An employee protection office funded directly through the foundation. Independent oversight. Legal representation available to staff. Policies rewritten. Signatures already filed. Emily slowly turned the pages. "You changed the system." Dominic's expression remained calm. "I should have done it years ago." The words hung between them. Honest. Heavy. For a moment neither spoke. Then a nurse approached carrying another folder. Hospital billing records. Insurance approvals. Care authorizations. Emily looked confused. The nurse smiled. "Your mother's coverage has been fully restored." Emily blinked. "How?" Dominic answered before the nurse could. "Someone used her medical debt as leverage." His voice remained quiet. "That ends today." Emily looked down at the paperwork. For years, every invoice had felt like another weight tied around her ankles. Now the stack was gone. Not erased. Resolved. Properly. Legally. Cleanly. She swallowed hard and looked away, before emotion could show too clearly on her face. A week later, Blackthorn House held its first all-staff assembly under the new policies. Housekeepers stood beside managers. Kitchen workers stood beside executives. No separate entrances. No separate sections. Dominic stepped to the front of the room with a simple employee file in his hands. Emily recognized it immediately. Her own. "For years," he said, "records inside this house were altered." The room fell silent. Names were ignored. Complaints were buried. People were made invisible. His gaze moved across the crowd before settling on her. "That ends now." He opened the file. Emily Carter. Just her name. Nothing dramatic. Yet the room seemed to shift around it. Because he said it the way powerful people say the names of people who matter. Not a maid. Not staff. Not girl. Emily Carter. Several employees began applauding. Then more joined them. Then the entire room. Emily stood frozen for a second before finally lowering her eyes. Not from shame. From relief. Later that evening, after the crowd had gone home, she visited her mother again. The sunset painted warm gold across the room. Her mother sat awake near the window, more alert than usual. Dominic had already left. The paperwork was finished. The investigations were moving forward. The future, for the first time in years, felt larger than survival. Emily reached into her purse and removed the bracelet. 12 sapphires now circled the silver band. Complete again. Carefully, she fastened it around her wrist. Her mother stared at it, then smiled. "There it is." Emily felt her throat tighten. "There what is?" Her mother reached out and touched the bracelet gently. The missing stone. For a long moment neither woman spoke. Then her mother looked up and said her name clearly. Perfectly. Emily.
No hesitación. No confusión. No forgetting.
Just Emily. Later, walking back toward the parking lot, beneath the glow of the facility lights, she passed Dominic standing beside his car. He noticed the repaired bracelet immediately. This time she didn't pull her sleeve down to hide it. She didn't need to. She remembered me today, Emily said softly. Dominic nodded. Once, the smallest smile touched the corner of his mouth. Good. Emily looked at the bracelet, then back toward the lit window where her mother sat. The stone was never what mattered. Dominic waited. Emily's voice remained quiet. Certain. I just needed someone to stop pretending it wasn't missing. Dominic said nothing after that. He simply stood there in the evening light while she walked toward the future, and for the first time in a very long time, the truth was no longer the smallest thing in the room.